Hey everybody, today is Monday, August 21st, 2023. Coming up on the show today, from Obi-Wan Kenobi, editor Kelley Dixon.
You know, I want other people to know about this. First of all, I want assistants to have some hope out there, but I also want to show editors, if they have this inclination, how to actually do it.
And editor Josh Earl.
She was like, hey, do you want to work on Obi-Wan with me? It'll be fun. You'll come in as the first assist, but I'm telling you, we'll have a blast. And I was like, Obi-Wan, I'm in. I don't even care. Just sign it up.
Yes, all that and more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you again. We got another Emmy season darling on tap to talk about today. Last week, we didn't even know when the 2023 Emmys were going to be. At least not when I recorded the podcast. This week, we do. They have been moved from their usual September slot to January 15th, 2024, which unofficially would make them the 2024 Emmys. But let's not dwell on that now. To be a little more precise, the Creative Arts Emmys, in other words, the ones we care more about, will be taking place on January 6th and 7th. Two of the very talented editors who hope to hear their names read on one of those 2 days are Josh Earl and Kelley Dixon from Obi-Wan Kenobi. Together, they are nominated for Outstanding Picture Editing for a limited anthology series or movie. But here's the catch. Josh was Kelley's assistant on Obi-Wan. So how can that be that he's nominated with her for editing? More to the point, Josh has been an editor for a long time, even winning 5 Emmys already for his work on Deadliest Catch. So how can he be Kelley's assistant editor? You may have guessed these are all things we're going to talk about. If you have not seen the Disney Plus series Obi-Wan Kenobi, or it's been a little while since you have seen it, here's your Wikipedia-based refresher course. Obi-Wan Kenobi takes place 10 years after the events of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, in which the Jedi were purged with Order 66, and Obi-Wan Kenobi's former apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, became the Sith Lord Darth Vader. Kenobi is now in hiding on the planet Tatooine. Where else? What's he doing there? Well, he's secretly watching over Anakin's son Luke. You know him. All that fun gets interrupted when he is called on a mission to rescue Anakin's daughter Leia. It seems young Leia was kidnapped by the Galactic Empire's Jedi-hunting Inquisitors in a plot to draw Kenobi out of hiding. All of this leads to yet another dramatic duel between Kenobi and Vader. And I assure you, we will talk about that exciting showdown as well in our little chat with Kelley and Josh. Before we dig into all that, join me, why don't you, in digging into the best way you can make sure your next film or TV show sounds absolutely stellar. And this is, of course, by making an alliance with our beloved Rough Cut sponsor, Extreme Music. From one end of the galaxy to the next, they have been delivering the very best in production audio to film and TV makers like you. They can give all this to you because they have the absolute Jedi masters of producing and composing, making their music. And getting your hands on that music could not be simpler. You just drop by extrememusic.com and search on keywords like tempo, genre, composer, and any other little hints that you want to give them, and they will explore their vast catalog of music to find just what you need. You can customize the instrumentation, you can choose different track links, you can even use their amazing reference track feature to give them a track so they can find you ones just like it. How's that for a Jedi mind trick? All of that stuff, as well as the licensing, can be done online, or they have actual human beings you can talk to help you work through it. So the next time you have a story to tell, prequel, sequel, series, or otherwise, make sure to visit extrememusic.com. Okay, gang, time to take a trip to Tatooine by way of a little thing called The Volume. Our tour guides today are Emmy-nominated editors Kelley Dixon and Josh Earl.
You don't have to try. And who do you have to try with? Oh, are you serious, Josh?
Josh Earl, if you don't stop typing.
Jesus.
Sorry, I'm literally hold on one second. I'm getting...
That's okay. Believe it or not, I actually do a lot of prep work for these interviews, and I know that people listening won't believe that, but something fun dawned on me as I was getting ready for this one, and that is that I don't know how you two met, because I don't think you've ever worked together prior to Obi-Wan. Could be wrong. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Star Wars is all about origin stories. I thought we should get the Kelley and Josh origin story.
That's actually a good story because you know what? It was 2014.
Yeah.
And we were both asked to be on this Emmy Prime Cuts panel, which is like they get a bunch of Emmy nominees together that year and put them on a panel. And I didn't know Josh. I had no idea who Josh was. And there was another guy on there named Kabir Akhtar. And there were a bunch of other panelists, but me, Josh, and Kabir sort of gravitated toward each other because when the moderator actually called on us, we actually had like fun shit to say. Who was the moderator? I think it was the dude that used to run like the Shield.
I think so.
He said something like, what is your best advice in the cutting room? And Josh said, don't be a dick. And I was like, that dude. And so after the whole thing, we sort of gravitated toward each other and we just became friends.
And I stand by that statement still. Don't be a dick. Might as well get that tattooed on the back of my neck.
If that doesn't win you an Emmy, Josh, I don't know what will. Kelley, in recent years, I know you've been doing things like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Wakanda Forever, things that do involve big action, lots of visual effects. But I'm sure the projects that first come to mind to people when they discuss your work are shows like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Real true to form, dramatic, largely dialogue-driven shows. How do either of those things play into how you got Obi-Wan Kenobi? Was there something specific about your background where they said, Cal, this is what we're looking for from you?
Yeah, actually, that is true. I mean, almost to a point. My agent called me up in like November of 2020, I believe it was. And he said, hey, Star Wars is doing a streaming thing on Obi-Wan Kenobi and they want to talk to you. And I'm like, why? What is Star Wars calling me for? I mean, I was really flattered, but I was like, I don't know, because I mean, I like Star Wars, but it really isn't in my sort of natural wheelhouse. It's a lot more action based and the drama is really not high drama. It's interesting and intriguing drama, but it's not like real deep stuff like I was used to. So the director, Deborah Chow, got on a Zoom with me and she just said, look, we really are looking for somebody who's really, really good with drama. And I was just like, oh, okay. And she said, we've been looking for you for a couple of years, but you've always been way too busy. And I was like really shocked. I called my agent. I said, Lucasfilm been looking for me for 2 years. And he's like, I had no idea. So I read the scripts. To be fair, I actually had to get the job before they let the scripts out. Like I wasn't able to read the scripts, but she really convinced me that it was going to be a lot of drama and that it was going to be very, very different from a lot of the Star Wars that we had seen. I was also really interested because it was very feature driven. One director for 6 episodes, but they were going to shoot it like a feature. They were going to cut it. They were going to post it like a feature. And I was really looking for that kind of experience rather than an episodic experience with different directors and showrunner and stuff like that. So I was excited about doing it. And then I read the scripts and I was all in. I just thought the scripts were really, really great. I was really excited about how deep the drama went with Obi-Wan himself and how he was full of self-doubt and this growth that he had to do throughout his journey was something that I felt like we hadn't really seen in Star Wars before, but it still stayed true to, all the stuff with Star Wars, like it still stayed true to the lore and the excitement and, it wasn't just lightsaber battles and spaceships. It was like this guy who was like dealing with fallibility.
His inner bullshit, tons of inner bullshit.
Yeah. And we got to see it on screen, which is something I feel like we don't really get to see a lot of times with Star Wars.
That's an interesting point about his inner turmoil or where he might be as a character. Sometimes I'll ask editors about the information that they have to work with. And sometimes they'll just say, it's what's in the script, it's what's in the dailies, and it's what the director and I talk about. Then there are others that really take it upon themselves to dig in almost like an actor would.
Josh knows all this shit. I mean, I definitely went back and watched them all. I watched all 3 of those prequel movies because it had been a long time since I saw Obi-Wan and what he was about and what that relationship with Anakin Skywalker was and stuff like that. So I went back and did it. But just as a general, I do as much research as I can. Like I was talking to a friend yesterday and I said, if I'm approached by anything that has a book, I will read the book before I'll talk to the director or, interview for the job because, and I will say that I think every single time that that's happened, that has gotten me the job. They seem impressed that I actually went and read and spent the time in reading it. But also you get some information with a script, but for gosh sakes, a script is 150 pages and a book is 700 pages. So you're going to get a lot more info and you'll be able to draw from all of the source material that you can in any stage. But for this, I definitely went and watched, all that stuff because I personally didn't remember. Now, Josh, I don't think that he had to do much research.
For folks playing at home, Josh just held up his lightsaber.
This, my friend, is Obi-Wan Kenobi's. From our show. Yeah, Hasbro, baby. Woo!
I thought you stole it.
Oh, listen, if I got anywhere near that saber with intent to steal, 3 droids would have murdered me from the rafters, and they would have dragged my body out with the mouse droid. That would have been it. I literally had watched these with my kids over the course of a year leading up to this without knowing about the show. But it was Revenge of the Sith, revisiting that was one of those moments where you're like, oh, this isn't as bad as I, once thought it was, maybe. But it's like, it's one of those weird situations where, like I told Kel, when I read the script, it was...
He didn't get to read the scripts until after he was hired, by the way.
Yeah.
You don't even get them when you say yes to the job. They have to full on go through the legal department contractually, get your whole signature, and then finally they'll get you the script.
I just got it from a Star Wars website. It was out or whatever.
No, he did not.
It's not true. Not true. Please don't kill me, Lucasfilm. No, it was one of those moments where I had, watched a bunch of them leading up to it, and then it was time to read it, and I realized this is going to be it. When I read this, that'll be it. That's going to be my experience for Obi-Wan. So the nerd part of me, I've joked about it before, but it was kind of true. I played music. I had the score playing in the background. I had the script up on the screen. I lit a couple of Tatooine scented candles, and I sat here and I just read through. And randomly I get Kel would be texting, what part are you on? Which episode? You on 3? What do you think of this? Oh, okay, I'll wait. I'm going to wait. And what's happening in 4? You see that? And I'm like, hold on. I'm trying to absorb, and I want to really love it. Because after this, it's about okay, I'm turning off that nerd part. Now it's time to tell a story and make it awesome, aside from my own guilty nerd pleasures,
Guilty nerd pleasures. That sounds like a Showtime series that I would definitely not watch.
It is After Dark. It's you guys don't want to see it. It's weird, but I still wanted to know where his headspace was at too. So I did re-poke around in Sith just to see I don't really remember how he left off, mentally, and how broken he really was. And then you see, and man, everything just crumbles for him at the end of Sith. Lost the Master, lost the entire Jedi Order, and he's basically brought the coming of the Dark Lord to the universe without knowing that part of it. He just knew, his Padawan is one of the darkest people to date, and little does he know, he lived, and surprise, he's coming for you. He's been looking for you, buddy. He's been searching the galaxy.
He's also given up everything that was his life before. He's done the realization of what this is the world now, and I basically have to just kind of figure out my way in it. And he's even approached by another Jedi, and he's like, look, that ain't me.
Yeah.
He has just turned his back on all of it because he realized, that aside from my own responsibility in all of this, we lost and we're done. And you better, hide if you want to survive. He's not dating, he's just like a dude living in a cave. And the thing about working on this is we all know what comes next. That's the interesting thing about working on anything, not just this, but anything where you sort of know what comes next. I mean, I worked on Better Call Saul, and I was like, well, we know how this all ends. So it's the really, really talented people. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about the writers, the people who conceive this kind of story, how they can keep the drama really, really great when we know the rest of the story. And to me, these scripts, not only about Obi-Wan, but about this character we haven't seen before, Reva, which was super interesting to me because I was just like, this girl throughout the episodes, I had no idea where this was going. I didn't read ahead. And, I was just really intrigued about what her agenda was. Because like I said, we kind of know where Obi-Wan is going, and his personal inner journey was very interesting to me, but this character had an outward agenda that would switch and change. And I thought the scripts were great, but Josh is a real huge Star Wars fan. I'm like, okay, does the fan side of you like it? But also, where are you on the Reva story? What do you think about what's happening here?
So hang on a second. I'm just going to scratch the Kelley, you've worked on both Better Call Saul and now Obi-Wan, where you already know the outcome. How do you keep up the drama? Okay, I scratched that one off because you nailed that one for me. That was the next question. But you know what? I'm just as excited about the one after that, which is about you, Josh, because who doesn't love talking about Josh? As much as I love to bust your chops, let's say, you've not only been a lead editor for a while, but you've already got 5 Emmy Awards on your shelf, which I can't believe are not visible in your webcam. That's
Yeah, show
the other side.
a little personal growth for you, Josh.
I'll show you in a bit.
When you got the call from Kelley about this, it was about being her assistant on the series.
Yep.
And now, spoiler alert, you're co-nominated as editors together for the finale. But just making that decision to, I got 5 Emmys. I'm lead editor. When she called you and said, Josh, this is the deal. I'd like you to be my assistant on this show. What was that call like? What was the pitch? And what factors did you consider in taking this job?
Kel is amazing, first of all. And she called a couple of times. She's been like, hey, listen, I just want to ask you, do you want to do this thing? And there was a couple times where I was already on a series, supervising something. I couldn't leave in the middle to do this. But what I'll say is I'll jump at any opportunity. And that's something that I think anyone would do, in your industry, if you're serious about it. Cause I have no ego when it comes to this stuff. She was like, hey, do you want to work on Obi-Wan with me? It'll be fun. You'll come in as the first assist. But I'm telling you, we'll have a blast. And I was like, said Obi-Wan, I'm in. I don't care. Just sign it up. The hurdle is, Lucasfilm wasn't looking for someone like me, so it's just the truth of it. They're putting it out to agents and they're looking for people who have certain credits and certain things. I'm not on their radar. So the amazing part was getting to talk to the head of, Lucasfilm Post and sort of the pitch. And I think Kelley even talked about how she initially put it through and was like, here, call this. This is the guy. You got to call him. And they kind of had that like, does he want to do it? Does he want to jump over and do this? Are you sure? We're going to call him. And I was like, tell him to call me. Tell him don't worry about it. I just want to talk to him. Let me talk to him.
They actually called me for a second and they said, well, Josh is actually quite an established editor. I'm like, yeah, no, I know.
But it still was not even a question in my book. So they called, I talked to them for a little bit and told them exactly what I'm telling you, which is like, hey, put me in there. I'll let me play in the sandbox, see what we could do. Because the other first assist, Ken Terry, who's amazing, he and I talked about it, and I was like, hey man, listen, I do my own stuff with a lot of scripted because I'm indie guy. So like, I've done all the scripted stuff that I have to do myself. But I know everyone's got rules and I'm ready to go, but like, let's hop on this. And he was like, well, I'm more of the tech guy. I'm more on this side and you're the creative guys. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. He was like, yeah, this should be a pretty great friendship. And it was. And also we had a second, Joya, who was actually a first, in her own right. She's amazing. And another person who was super helpful in my world because I came in going, I'm open. Let's do everything. Whatever comes my way, I'm just going to do it. And we did. And unscripted is a really big teacher in that. So not to mention doing it yourself. Like I had to do the workflows on my own. Having a structure was actually better than the half-ass way that I do things where I can't teach it to you, but I know I can do it. I know I can get it done. So it all started that way. And what was incredible was, once Kel started, I started a week earlier and I started like poking around and, meeting the crew and everything. But when Kel jumped in, she was like, let's go to set. Let's go talk to Deb. Let's get right there. So we're there. And she literally just laid it out on the line like, hey, Josh cuts, I cut. You got 2 cutters in this one room. So to Deb's credit, she did not have to be as cool as she was. She was like, neat. All right. Well, anyway, guys, here's the set. Come on down whenever you want. Let's go. And listen, I don't need an excuse to go visit a Star Wars set, first of all. But going down there with a purpose to be like, hey, do you need anything, Deb? Do you need us to do anything? What's the deal? The comfort level was built before we got to sit in that room together, which was amazing.
When I called Josh, like I'd called him when I got the job on Falcon and the Winter Soldier because I had an assistant that I had worked with on a couple things, but he was busy. He was in the middle of something and it was going to end. And I was kind of like, his name is Taylor Irvin and he still works for Marvel. They want to keep him forever. But, I called him up and I said, hey man, this is a really good opportunity. And he's like, yeah, but I'm in the middle of this and that. So I called Josh and I said, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but I got this Marvel thing. I'd really rather not go with somebody who I don't know. I've got to go on location. And that was kind of a bigger deal because Josh has 2 kids and, a wife and a house and, all that kind of stuff. So it was going to be a little harder for him to be able to break away for 4 months to go on location to Atlanta. And then Taylor decided that it was a really good opportunity, which was pretty life-changing for him. But then when I got this call, Taylor basically was like, I can't do it. Then I was kind of like in a pinch, and I'm like, and then I called Josh again. I said, hey man, something else has come up, and Josh was pretty much in. I mean, we don't really like to talk about it because, yeah, Josh is an editor in his own right. But I will say to, his credit and to the credit of the show is that our intention was always to have Josh be cutting. Because sometimes in the real world, you have to use these things as a stepping stone. And this was a great stepping stone. And I told Josh, I said, I want them to see you cutting. Whenever they're around, I don't want them to just see you trying to like do something with dailies or color or whatever, or visual effects. I want them to see you cutting. And then, they become very, very comfortable, hopefully, with this assistant or this person cutting. Also, I wanted to make sure that when I did mention I want to share with Josh, that the answer wouldn't be like, well, let's think about it. I wanted it to be, oh yeah, sure. And that's what actually happened. And I told Josh, I said, we're going to play this very, very, very slowly. Let Deborah see you cutting. Let her start working with you on her own stuff, like which happened. Let her start, referring to you basically as, oh, let me go in Josh's room and work with that, which happened. Josh has a great personality. I always feel like all Josh needs to do is be in front of people and he'll start talking and they'll start talking and they'll really fall in love with him. And they did. And to be fair, I always had the intention of sharing episode 6 with Josh. The issue, though, with a lot of things, especially I share with a lot of assistants, I've shared a lot of credits. And the issue is usually, does it cost us anything to share? That's usually the issue with production. Does it cost us anything? How does it affect what we have to do other than just go in and change the credit? And it does cost them something. A lot of times, I'm not sure what all the rules are, but like just the cursory, I know that they have to make sure that there's enough assistance for an additional editor. So if there's an editor, there has to be enough assistance. And we had enough assistance for Josh to be cutting. I think this is the first time that we've ever really been very, very public about that whole story, right, Josh?
I think so. Most interviews, they're so quick. It's like, this is the place to talk more about how it all went down.
I want other people to know about this. First of all, I want assistants to have some hope out there, but I also want to show editors, if they have this inclination, how to actually do it. So you don't, cause an uproar. It's like sometimes you have to do it very slowly. I mean, that's kind of how I worked on Better Call Saul and getting Chris McCaleb moved up. He started on Breaking Bad the last season. And I told him, hey, man, I want to share a credit with you, which had never been done. We had not done that at all. And I said, I want to share a credit with you, but every time they come up to editorial, I want them to always see you cutting. And they did. And so that's how we worked it. And that one was a little harder. It was like, okay, how do we pay him? How do we, and all that. But it worked because they were already comfortable with him doing that.
Well, you both sort of casually talked about, hey, we're just going to go down to set. We're going to talk to Deborah. In this case, the set is the volume, which I think is an experience that is still pretty unique for an editor to be a part of. I'd like to get your take on what benefits does that volume model, that technology have for editors, or any negative impacts that technology has on the way you work?
Other than the fact that it's like, listen, I think people should definitely go check out the little docs it did for Mandalorian and Obi-Wan on Disney Plus, because there's a really good way to look at that and see what we're talking about, because it's an insane thing to step into just physically. And we did it. We got to step into an Imperial hangar at Fortress Inquisitorius. And it was like, no one was around. They were on like lunch, and we kind of just walked on and we kind of both just stopped for a second. We're like, holy shit. I mean, this is a 2-story screen that wraps around your head. It's incredible. But what it does for you in the dailies is, I mean, one of the first things we got was one of the last scenes, which was little Leia putting on her little belt, and she got her holster, and she, puts on the gloves and all those things. Those dailies, she was in Alderaan. The practical set was morphed with the volume background set. The digital sets were already in place. So when you're looking, you're not waiting on, we need some elements so we can lay this in and composite a quick Alderaan in the background so we're not looking at a green screen. You're cutting with what it will ultimately pretty much look like with a little bit of VFX cleanup. So that to me was incredible because you could get your emotion. You could worry about just what you would usually worry about in the dailies, right? You're looking for the proper takes. You're looking for those little moments of emotion, those little tiny itty bitty things, instead of worrying about, do I need to get this temped in so that there's a background, or what's going to be the deal here? We didn't have a lot of like green screen, blue screen stuff. Like it looked like they were there, like it was ready to go in the dailies. Granted, VFX had a shit ton of work to do, cleaning it up and getting these little things. And, that background, that hallway is going to be this narrow, not this narrow, or the lighting's different. They would tweak that infinitely throughout the days coming, but the sets were basically laid before you in those dailies, which for a Star Wars, it's pretty incredible, I think.
So we walked in there, and the first time we saw it, it was the planet Daiyu. And it's really big. It's soundstage size. So that's got to be like 1 square city block or something, right? And you look in there. I remember us squinting because we couldn't see the end of it. We were like, we can't figure out like what's real and what's not. And that's how good the visual on the screen is. And when you get really close to it, it's a lot of little dots. It's pretty neat.
Not to mention, the lighting alone can be adjusted on a dime as well in the volume. Chung-Hoon could put a laser pointer in an area and go, I want a key here. And they would a big circle would show up and it would be white light, like it would be, he just put it here so it would reflect off properly. And he'd just choose areas. Now, granted, there's way more in-depth lighting going on than just that, but there was times where he'd be like, well, I want more right here, and he'd just pick the areas, and the brain trust would, just like in Photoshop, it seemed, they just make the circle, and it would just be a giant light now that exists on the left panel that would make it so it's lighting the right panel, anyone who's over on that side. It's pretty incredible.
Because you're so embedded with production, does it accelerate the process by removing certain steps that you might normally have?
Maybe a compositing one?
I don't really know if I have an answer for that. It didn't really change anything for me. The previs situation in figuring out what the shots are going to be helps them be able to set up the volume. Previs is important for budgeting and figuring out what shots are going to and how we're going to tell the story. But for that situation, previs is extremely helpful for the needs of the volume and what the background requirements for any shot are going to be.
How about the need for you to do any sort of temp VFX yourselves?
I was going to say, because we have previs, stunt viz, and tech viz, right? Like you're going to have all three of those just so we know that's the setup. But the post viz is the secondary part that I do think we had the team. Deb was amazing and was just like, get them in here so they're next to us. So they were like next to my bay. So when we wanted to create a shot, Deb would be like, can you tell them to do this? The ship comes in and then this and that, and have them just temp out that shot and we'll see. So for a full shot creation, that was cool. But one thing we had less of was probably more for our VFX editors was Steve and Annie, who were amazing. There was a lot less temp compositing, like he would have a time where he's like, all right, hey, this blue screen, before it goes to Kathleen Kennedy, this blue screen needs to be a long hallway. Can you temp that in with some of the elements from the volume? We didn't have to do that as much, like that was something that, because the volume was there and because it created these giant temporary digital sets, you didn't have to do a lot of temp compositing to then get it to a rough cut to send out to people to kind of go, hey, it's going to be fine. There was less of it. There was times where it was, like in episode 4, we had the windows where outside was all water. In Fortress Inquisitoris, they're underwater. It stayed blue screen for the most part, but that's because the hallways were all built or digitally there.
One of the other things that was regular set with blue was the rooftops in episode 2. Those were all like in a regular stage with blue all the way around. So we had to composite everything that was there.
They just had to do less of it because of the volume. Yeah. And one thing that had a blue screen that I nearly nerd melted all over was the Imperial Star Destroyer where Vader stands at the window. Like that's blue. There was blue screen out the window, but Joya Caruso, who was the other assistant, and we were walking through, and they were just changing something, and we were kind of just standing, and I was like, "Oh, let's just see. We got these badges, man. Hey, man, can we just like we just check this? They're like, yeah, go ahead, whatever, do your thing. And so we're like walking up the corridor, walking through the pathway to the front of the window, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna throw up. Hey, is this, do we want to lose our jobs and take a picture of this? What's the deal here? Because I know a droid's gonna murder me the minute I pull the camera out. So we stood quietly, didn't take out any camera, just stood right at the main window of the Star Destroyer, just kind of staring out, going but to blue screen, there was no volume there.
There was one instance where I think it was during the shooting of the big final epic battle. We were down there for something. I can't remember what. And then there's a props guy who handles all the lightsabers. And it's pretty interesting because he has all different lightsaber hilts for different instances. So they had like the ones that were like had the little beam on them and lit and, and they were waiting for some technical camera thing or something to happen. And so somebody handed both to me and I was like, oh, wow. And then our production manager, Thomas Hayslip, who is like, he does really, really big stuff. I think he just finished, he didn't just finish Oppenheimer, but his name is up on Oppenheimer. I mean, he's like a full-on producing credit on these things. So he whipped out his cell phone to take a picture. And I was just, my first instinct was horrified because I was like, oh, you can't take a pic. But then I was like, well, this dude is a EP.
And then they killed him. They just shot him dead right there. It was insane. They just gone, vaporized.
But what happened was they were ready to like roll. And so they took the lightsabers away from me. So we never got that picture, but it was pretty funny. And like I said, to me, the big part of the story is he whipped out a cell phone to take a picture. And my first thought was, oh, you can't do that. What are you doing? But, I realized, well, he could do it. One of the things I will say too, and Josh can probably talk more to this, but there's this one props guy, he handles like all the lightsabers. He was showing them to us at one point, and one of them was like Obi-Wan saber, but it was like a dog toy. It looked real, like real metal, but it was rubber and it actually like squeezed. It didn't make any noise, but it squeezed like a dog toy. And I was like, what the hell? And he's like, yeah, when they have to run, when he has to have it on his hip and he has to run, you don't want to have him running and have this thing smacking against his hip. But it never occurred to me that they would have a prop like that.
I don't know why with you two, I write more than 4 questions. And I know I'm not going to get to all of them, but there's certain ones I want to make sure we get to. And of course, that's the finale and the lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. There's a couple elements to it visually I wanted to ask you about. One is the intercutting. That lightsaber duel is taking place while Reva is hunting young Luke. And so you're going back and forth between those two sequences. There are some natural places where you can cut, like Vader buries Ben under some rocks. But then there's other times mid-action, you're cutting back and forth. What are the clues for you instinctively as to when I can cut away to that other sequence?
I mean, there was some design, obviously, from Deb in the beginning, she knew where she wanted to cut, but visually it definitely changed. There was less times. We definitely cut less times and merged some areas. Some of those were built to be preemptive, like wipes. Like this first section of the fight ends with Vader's at a defensive stance and Obi-Wan jumps at camera, wipes right into Reva entering into the Lars farm. So there were those moments, but then there were times where it was coming back into the scene. We would create a shot. We'd take a shot that was shot normally and make it super wide, and rocks would come past. Like Kel and I talked a lot about that shot and other things, but it was like, there was a moment where Kelley was like, hey, what if we just came through the rocks from way back here and we did it like this? And we went through iterations of that, So some of the transition points were predisposed, and then some had to kind of come out of nowhere because we did merge parts of the fight. There were scenes that might have been shorter at one point and we'd intercut more, but ultimately it was merged together and we kind of had to create those moments as they came. Kel, even that moment you created with Reva smacking the box in half, right? Like that was a transitional point that was created to come from there, cut into the rocks coming down. They're fighting in the distance, that kind of stuff. So it was a mixture of both.
Yeah, because originally the way that it was written, I believe, the intercuts were there, but they were in different places. I think at that point where Reva's engaging for the first time with the Larses, she ends up following Owen up the stairs, and then they end up on this sort of bridge. And we realized that it just wasn't that exciting and flattering to have her run and chase him. It just didn't look that great. And so we were like, well, what can we do that's a lot more dynamic and a lot more aggressive? And, Deb was like, can you find a shot where she's just cutting across and we'll build? Because Owen had pushed these big canisters down the stairs at her. And she's like, we'll find a shot where she cuts across and we'll just build in post-viz. We're looking at Reva, so the box would come from the camera side and she would just cut through it. And so that was, not real. We found a shot where, she sliced down. And what it did was it broke the box in two. The cool thing about working with lightsabers is that they create a light trail that's very, very exciting and dynamic. And so, we use that to propel us into a flying camera through canyon stuff. And that shot was created as well because that whole thing was shot on the volume and they can do some amazing things. It's a big space. So they did fly a camera. So I learned a lot on Star Wars about what was possible. And one of the things that Deborah would come in and say, she's like, you know what, that shot where the two guys are fighting and where the camera's flying through the canyon, shrink that way down. And I was kind of like, what? So it was like, let's say it was maybe a third of the frame size when it came into dailies. Now it's like a 10th of the frame size. And I was like, huh? But then I sort of realized, well, heck, we're creating the rest of the world anyway, so they can be any size we want. And so it really opened my mind to look at what is possible and also not be stymied by the fact that there's no way that we have enough money to create these things, because the whole point is we have budgeted to create these things. I think that working on smaller stuff with very, very little budget is really, really helpful. I mean, I really feel like it was advantageous to me to have worked on much smaller things, because I will tell you that I got incredibly resourceful, and it does help me on bigger things where you don't have the budget and you have to make something work. Learning how to use footage, reverse it, flop it, do all kinds of things, find other things, and make them work. But on bigger things, really big things, I had to learn how to open my mind up to, hey, there's money. We have money. So if you want that spaceship to fly overhead, you can do that.
A point that's come up previously with other Star Wars properties we've talked about is that for as much as we tend to focus on the visuals of Star Wars and things like the volume, it's really the sound design, the score that really makes Star Wars what it is. And I think a great example of that is in that final battle. Obi-Wan Kenobi gets the upper hand on Darth Vader and cracks his helmet. And you do this, or somebody does this amazing sound design where we're going back and forth between Hayden's voice, Anakin's voice, and James Earl Jones' Darth Vader voice. Some really cool sound design going on there, and getting to play with that iconic Darth Vader breathing sound. Tell me about the hand that you two had in doing the sound design for that scene.
It was very, very important to Deborah Chow, the director, for us to come up with the right sound. She wanted this to be not the same as the other Star Wars. She wanted it to be its own thing that melded perfectly well with the others. But we weren't allowed to use any Star Wars thematic temp score. It sounded a lot like a Star Wars would sound, and that was, much more a credit to Josh. Josh really did a lot of temp music, working with temp music on this. But we weren't allowed to use the themes. Every once in a while, Josh and our music editor, Nick Fitzgerald, would sort of work in a little bit of theme, and it would always get caught and be like, no, you can't use that here. But then, as far as different stormtrooper voices or different Obi-Wan voices, or even the breathing with Vader is definitely one of the ways that you can understand what is happening inside with Vader, because he's got the mask on, so all you really have with him is body movement and the breathing and a little bit of the talking, if he actually is talking. But the breathing, I think, is a lot more indicative in a lot of ways. And so we worked a lot with that. As far as the voices, once he was under the rocks, that was all us, and it took a lot of passes. There were a lot of different iterations of what was going on, and we had to use, oh my God, so many different, you're going to love this. We had to use so many different Avid tools, to do that because, I was taking, like at one point I was mixing down sounds. I used compression expansion a lot. I used pitch shift a lot. I was rubber banding. I was doing all kinds of stuff, but then taking that source, mixing it down and then putting it in. And I mean, just saving all of the iterations and all of the different work that I did to each element because we had to be able to go back to the original and be able to do it again. That was a huge amount of work.
Audio suite, baby.
We were taking like things that he had said in Revenge of the Sith and using those. And that was a huge amount of stuff. But I guess the main answer to your question is we had to do all of it in the room because Deb didn't want any surprises once we got to the sound mix. She wanted to make sure that it was everything that she intended before it went any further.
For the crack mask, we definitely recorded some of that heavy breathing was off of the mask, the Hasbro mask that they made the toy of. Just because we were like, where is that clean? We got to get that clean just so we could get it ourselves. I just recorded it at my house and we used it in there. It's part of it. Nick Fitzgerald did a great job. He did a bunch of effects for us, actually. Not only was he amazing and with temp music, we got to team up a lot on it. It was awesome. But he also did some of that early stuff where you can hear the sort of distortion and whatnot when the crack mask is happening and you hear Vader. We didn't have any of the James Earl Jones stuff yet, so it's on temp mix. So he sort of helped us create that back and forth where you're hearing Anakin and then Vader would slip through. Like that was all sort of pre-designed, and we put a lot of love and time into those moments to try and make it so it's at least where we want it to kind of be here in the temp so that Skywalker can take it and, make it even better. That's kind of how it went.
We definitely were doing like breaths and like gasping for air. There was one that I was super proud of. I don't know if it sounds like I originally had planned for it to sound, but there was one where I took like 3 different pieces of our samples and was like actually like placing them where you saw Hayden Christensen actually like falter. I mean, that's a huge amount of work that you have to do to make that whole thing natural. And it's just like spending so much at that point too, spending so much time on just getting, the smallest of moments right. Because I remember when I actually put one where he sort of trips and Deb was like, oh my God, that's so perfect. I'm like, yeah, that works really well, and again, it was one of those two where Obi-Wan was under the rocks and what was he hearing and how much was he hearing and did it fade out? And I think one of the big questions at that point is what motivates him to get his mojo back and start fighting back. Because that was a big thing with Deb. She was like, well, I want to feel like he's like done for. And I'm like, we know he's not. I'm not saying that, her question was wrong. I'm saying that's not the real essence of all this. We need to be with the character. We need to be fully invested at that point. And how, as editors, can we make sure that the audience is fully invested, knowing that he's an old man, and the next time we see him, we know he's going to win. I mean, with stuff like this where we know the answer, as editors, it's our responsibility to make the drama be where you're invested, even though even if we didn't know the show's called Obi-Wan, he's going to make it.
Since we were talking about sound, I'm prone to asking editors if during the course of their project there was any way that they made themselves a part of the finished film. And usually it's through sound. Josh, being the uber Star Wars nerd melt fan that you are you in Obi-Wan Kenobi, the series, at all?
Yes. When we were building these episodes for 2, 4, and 6, there was a lot of temp stormtroopers. There were some aliens. There was this and that. And I was definitely like, even if I don't get to the end, I'm temping my voice in everywhere I can. Anytime there was like, made alien voices. I did the troopers bumping into each other like, hey, get out of the way. All those things all the way throughout 2, 4, and 6. Even the old country alien in the end. What I'm happy about is the voice I did for him was, what do you need, kid? Like this old country guy. Ultimately, they cast a country actor, and I was like, that's a victory for me. I don't care. I don't have to be that guy. Otherwise, they rip my voice out of most of it. You get voice actors, all that fun stuff. But at one point, Deb was like, we got to start swapping out Josh's voice. He's in this whole thing. But Josh, did you want to do a voice? And I was like, whatever, Deb. It's not a big deal. I don't know. Jaquel was literally like, cut it out. He wants to do a stormtrooper voice. And I was like, yeah, I totally would. And she was like, okay, pick one. And I was like, all right, I kind of want to be this stormtrooper that gets killed by Obi-Wan. Like, I want to be murdered by Obi-Wan. What's the problem there? So we tweaked the words because I had done a lot of temp words, which some stuck to the end, which is fun because, stormtroopers are stormtroopers. But those specifically, we went back and forth, and she actually had Joby write, lines for that. How would he say this? Let's give him a couple lines. So I have a couple lines, and then I'm brutally murdered by Obi-Wan, which I can't ask for a better moment to be in a Star Wars for. So stormtrooper number whatever, I'm that guy, the guy who gets murdered after Princess Leia gets saved or during Princess Leia's rescue. I'm the one who talks, goes, hey, what's going on? And then it's like, I got to do all that fun stuff.
Josh would do all these other things where he could say what he wanted in our temp stuff. So he would like, what's that? What? Wait, oh God, okay.
Oh no.
Like there was one, I think where Obi-Wan is like hiding in a hallway and stormtroopers go by. Josh is like temping him like, hey, so do you know what we're having for lunch? Is it pizza day? Or I can't remember. It was so many funny things. I mean, he would do it and I would start working with the scene and I would just start laughing because I was like, oh my God. I thought it was really quite funny. But, at the end of the day, Deborah, she didn't really want them to be funny. She wanted them to be serious and she didn't want them to be joking.
I think if anything comes out of this little talk we had today, it's the love that you both put into this project and how much you loved working together. It was a nerd melt moment for both of you. I'm not going to let you off the hook, Cal. I think you both really just enjoyed being immersed in this world. The only request I have is that please promise me the next interview you do about this, try and come out of your shells a little bit, okay?
Yeah. Well, we'll try not to be so quiet and within ourselves.
I think you got a lot of exclusives, actually, because unfortunately, we have not been approached very often about this until, this nomination came up.
And yet you're so approachable.
People don't really know us and they don't really, a lot of our friends and our peers know our history, but a lot of people don't. And I'm glad that we got a chance to work together. I hope we get to work together again. We've remained friends to this day. I don't think we fought at all. I don't even think we disagreed. We worked together for a little more than a year, maybe a year and a handful of weeks on this. And I will say that it was probably the most fun that I've had on anything, where every day going into work, especially working with Josh, was really, really enjoyable and fun. And we were allowed to bring dogs to the set. So I had actually a little puppy that I got right after production ended. He was 12 weeks old and I got him. And my director, Deb, she walks in the room and she's like, I was promised puppies. And so I had like a little black lab puppy in my room. And Deb's assistant had a 2-year-old golden retriever that she would bring by. And Dave Filoni has I think some kind of Irish wolfhound or something that his assistant would bring by, and they would run. We had a big office with very few people because of COVID. So we had a lot of space and the dogs would like run. So it was a really, really enjoyable environment and atmosphere. It was one of my very favorite cutting rooms. I got to say, I'm a baseball fan. It was one of my favorite cutting rooms probably ever because I had a window. It was at Manhattan Beach Studios. And my window was at the very south end of the lot. And I would look out onto a full-on baseball field. And there was baseball like all summer long. And I could just stop cutting for a moment and go sit out in the window and just watch baseball for a couple of minutes. And it was a really, really good experience in so many ways to work on this, other than just being on Star Wars, which was cool in and of itself.
I second all of it.
It sounds like it was a great time. And Cal, when this interview comes out, don't be surprised if your opening quote is, I was promised puppies.
Exactly.
I didn't say that. My director said that.
Who doesn't love puppies, especially in the cutting room? They're so cute. Plus, they don't give you any notes about how you cut the second act. Pets or no pets, Kelley and Josh did a lot of great work on Obi-Wan Kenobi, especially with that big showdown between Kenobi and Vader. Congrats to them on the Emmy nomination. Best of luck on awards weekend. And a big thank you for taking the time to talk with us about their show. You know, a long time ago, and cutting rooms probably not too far away, both Kelley and Josh were using Avid Media Composer to win Emmys for shows like Breaking Bad and Deadliest Catch. Now, as talented as they are, they would be amazing editors on any platform. But they must have their reasons for trusting their talents to Avid Media Composer. Maybe you want to give it a try too and see what reasons you'll have to love it. Only one way to find out, and that is to get a media composer of your very own. Like a lightsaber, you can customize it all special the way you like it. And I can help you get going with all of this. Just hit that little link I put in the show notes and it'll light speed you on over to the Media Composer page on avid.com. Our story for today has ended. Show's over. Hope you enjoyed it. So many other editors out there in the universe for us to meet together. So many other uncharted cutting rooms for us to explore. So come on back again and we can do that. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.